What if I told you that two things sitting in almost every home, a pile of scrap wood and a bottle of cheap vinegar, could actually produce real, usable gas? Not a science experiment, not a theory, a real process that people have been quietly using for decades, completely off the radar of mainstream energy conversation. And the reason you've never heard about it has less to do with the technology and more to do with who benefits when you stay dependent on the gas pump. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what we are about to walk through is one of those topics that sounds too simple to be real until you understand the actual chemistry behind it. And once you do, you will never look at a pile of firewood or a bottle of vinegar the same way again. Before we go any further, if you are new here, this channel is called Boring Economic Update for a reason. We do not do hype. We do not chase viral trends. We talk about the quiet, unglamorous, often ignored corners of energy, economics, and technology that actually matter to real people. If that sounds like your kind of content, hit subscribe right now. It costs you nothing and you will not regret it. Now let's get into this. The world runs on energy. Everything you do, heating your home, cooking your food, driving to work, running a business, all of it depends on some form of fuel. And for most of us, that fuel comes from a system we have zero control over. Prices go up, we pay more. Supply gets tight, we suffer. There is no negotiation, there is no alternative. You either pay what they ask or you go without. But here is the thing. That system, the one that makes you feel completely powerless, was not always the only option. For most of human history, people produced energy locally. They used what was around them. Wood, animal fat, plant material, water, wind. The shift to centralized fossil fuel energy happened over the last 150 years, and it happened fast. So fast that most people completely forgot that decentralized energy production is not only possible, it is actually how humanity survived for thousands of years. Now, I am not here to tell you to go live in the woods and burn campfires. That is not the point. The point is this: there are processes, real and scientifically understood processes, that allow ordinary materials like wood to be converted into usable combustible gas. And when you add something like vinegar into the picture, things get even more interesting. Let's start with the wood side of this equation, because that is where the foundation of this entire idea sits. When you heat wood, or any organic material, in a low oxygen or zero oxygen environment, something remarkable happens. Instead of burning, the wood breaks down chemically. This process is called pyrolysis. It has been known and studied for well over a century. During pyrolysis, wood releases a mixture of gases. These gases include hydrogen, carbon monoxide, methane, and a range of other hydrocarbons. Collectively, this gas mixture is called syngas, short for synthesis gas. And here's the critical part. Syngas is combustible. It burns. You can use it to run engines, generate electricity, cook food, or heat a space. This is not speculation. This is documented, peer-reviewed, industrially applied chemistry. During World War II, when petroleum supplies were severely disrupted in Europe, thousands of vehicles were actually converted to run on wood gas, which is essentially a field version of syngas produced from burning wood in a controlled, oxygen-limited environment. There are photographs, records, engineering manuals from that era. It happened, it worked. So the first piece of the puzzle is already solid. Wood, when processed correctly, gives you gas, real, usable gas. And you do not need a massive industrial plant to do it. Small-scale gasifiers, devices that produce syngas from wood, have been built by individuals in garages and backyards using basic materials and modest mechanical skill. Now, this is the point where most people in online discussions stop. They talk about wood gas, they show you a few videos of homemade gasifiers, and they leave it there. But that is only half the story, because when you bring vinegar, or more precisely acetic acid, into the picture, a completely different and equally fascinating process opens up. Vinegar, at its core, is a dilute solution of acetic acid. Acetic acid is a simple organic molecule, and organic molecules, under the right thermal and chemical conditions, can also be broken down into smaller energy-carrying compounds. When acetic acid is heated, it can decompose into acetone and carbon dioxide. Acetone itself is a flammable compound. But more importantly, acetic acid plays a fascinating role when it interacts with certain catalysts and heat sources, including the byproducts of wood pyrolysis. The interaction between wood-derived gases and acetic acid under specific conditions can enhance the quality and combustibility of the resulting gas mixture. Researchers studying biomass conversion have noted that organic acids, acetic acid being the most common dioxide, are naturally produced during wood pyrolysis anyway, meaning wood and vinegar are not as separate as they first appear. They are chemically related, they are part of the same family of organic decomposition products. This is where the real story begins, and we are just getting started. So we have established that wood, when heated in a controlled low-oxygen environment, breaks down into syngas, And we have established that vinegar, acetic acid, NAR, is not some random addition to this conversation. It is chemically connected to the same family of organic compounds that wood produces when it decomposes under heat. But now the question becomes practical. How does this actually work in a way that a regular person, not a chemical engineer, not a petroleum scientist, not someone with a university laboratory, can actually understand and potentially use? Let's slow down and walk through this carefully, because the details here matter. When wood undergoes pyrolysis, it does not just produce syngas, it produces a range of outputs. You get charcoal, the solid leftover, you get bio-oil, a dark, complex liquid mixture, and you get gas. The gas fraction is what we are most interested in for energy purposes. The exact composition of that gas depends on several factors: the type of wood, the temperature of the process, how fast the heating happens, and whether any steam or other inputs are introduced into the system. Here is where things get genuinely interesting. When steam is introduced into a wood gasification system, a process called steam reforming, the quality and energy content of the resulting gas improves significantly. The steam reacts with carbon in the char and with carbon monoxide in the gas, producing more hydrogen. And hydrogen is one of the cleanest, most energy-dense fuels known to science. So by simply adding water vapor to the process, you shift the output toward a richer, more useful gas mixture. Now hold that thought about steam and water vapor, because this connects directly to the vinegar side of the equation. When you heat a dilute acetic acid solution, which is exactly what household vinegar is, it produces steam and acetic acid vapor together. When that vapor enters a high-temperature environment like a wood gasifier, something interesting happens. The acetic acid does not just pass through, it participates in the thermal chemistry happening inside the system. It can decompose, react with other gases, and contribute additional hydrogen and carbon-containing molecules to the gas stream. The result, in certain configurations, is a gas mixture that burns more consistently and with slightly higher energy content than wood gas alone. Now I want to be careful here because this channel does not exaggerate. The effect of adding vinegar to a small-scale wood gasifier is not going to double your gas output overnight. That is not the claim. The claim, and this is supported by the underlying chemistry, is that acetic acid, introduced as a vapor into a wood pyrolysis or gasification system, can improve the hydrogen yield and overall combustibility of the resulting gas. That is a meaningful improvement, especially for small-scale off-grid applications where efficiency matters enormously. And here is the economic angle, which is really what this channel is about at its core. Wood is one of the most abundant, renewable, and low-cost materials on the planet. In rural areas, agricultural regions, and forested communities around the world, wood waste, sawdust, offcuts, branches, pallets, scrap lumber is often treated as a disposal problem rather than an energy asset. People pay to haul it away. It sits in landfills. It rots in fields. Meanwhile, those same communities are paying real money for propane, natural gas, or diesel to meet their basic energy needs. The economic gap there is not small. It is significant. A family in a rural area spending several $100s a month on propane for heating and cooking could, with the right knowledge and a modest upfront investment in a small gasifier system, dramatically reduce that cost by converting locally available wood waste into usable gas. The technology to do this is not new. It is not experimental. It is proven, it is documented, and in several parts of the world, particularly in Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, and rural India, small-scale biomass gasification is already being used at the community level for exactly this purpose. The reason it has not taken off in places like the United States is not technical. It is economic and regulatory. The existing energy infrastructure, the pipelines, the utility companies, the fuel distributors, represents trillions of dollars in investment and generates enormous ongoing revenue. Decentralized, locally produced energy from biomass does not fit neatly into that system. It does not generate meter readings. It does not produce monthly bills. It is difficult to tax, difficult to regulate, and difficult to profit from at the corporate scale. And so it gets very little attention in mainstream energy policy discussions, very little coverage in major media, and almost no promotion from the institutions that shape public understanding of energy options. That does not mean it is fringe. That does not mean it is unreliable. It means it is inconvenient for certain very powerful interests. And that distinction matters when you are trying to understand why something that works, something with a century of real-world application behind it, remains almost completely unknown to the average person filling up their gas tank or paying their utility bill every month. There is one more layer to this story that most people miss entirely, and it has to do with what happens after the gas is produced. When wood is gasified, the solid byproduct is biochar. Biochar is not waste. It is a remarkably useful material. It has been studied extensively as a soil amendment, meaning it improves the fertility and water retention of agricultural soil. Farmers in various parts of the world have been using biochar for generations, often without knowing the scientific name for what they were doing. The liquid byproduct, bio-oil, also has applications from fuel to chemical feedstock. So a well-run wood gasification system is not just producing gas. It is producing multiple useful outputs from what started as waste material. This is the kind of closed-loop, low-waste thinking that mainstream energy conversation almost never reaches. And it is exactly the kind of thinking that becomes more valuable as energy costs continue to rise, and resource efficiency becomes less of an environmental talking point and more of a basic economic survival strategy for ordinary households and small businesses. We are getting close to the part of this story where everything comes together: the science, the economics, the practical application, and the bigger picture of what this means for people who are tired of being completely at the mercy of energy prices they cannot control. So let us bring this all together, because we have covered a lot of ground, and it is worth stepping back and looking at the full picture before we talk about what this actually means for you, sitting wherever you are right now, dealing with energy costs that seem to go in only one direction. We started with a simple question: can wood and vinegar actually produce usable gas? And the answer, when you go beyond the headline and look at the real science, is yes. Not in a magical way, not in an unlimited solve all your problems way, but in a real chemically grounded, historically documented, practically applicable way. Wood gasification is a proven technology. Acetic acid, the core component of vinegar, is a naturally occurring byproduct of wood decomposition and plays a measurable role in the thermal chemistry of biomass conversion. The combination, under the right conditions, produces combustible gas that can be used for cooking, heating, and in some configurations, running small engines or generators. That is not hype. That is not a trick. That is chemistry that has been sitting in plain sight for over a century, used quietly by people who needed practical energy solutions and did not have the luxury of waiting for a utility company to run a pipeline to their door. But here is where I want to push the conversation a little further, because the real story here is not just about wood and vinegar. It is about something much bigger. It is about the gap between what is technically possible at the individual and community level and what the mainstream energy conversation tells you is possible. That gap is enormous, and it is not an accident. Think about the information environment you live in when it comes to energy. You hear about massive solar farms, about hydrogen pipelines that will cost billions to build, about nuclear plants that take decades to come online. You hear about electric vehicles and the grid upgrades needed to support them. All of that is real. All of it matters at a large scale. But what you almost never hear about are the small-scale, accessible, low-cost technologies that ordinary people can actually implement right now with materials that are already around them without waiting for a government program or a corporate infrastructure investment. Wood gasification is one of those technologies. Small-scale biogas production from organic kitchen waste is another. Passive solar heating using simple construction techniques is another. These are not exotic or experimental ideas. They are proven, documented, and in many cases centuries old. But they share one characteristic that makes them invisible in the mainstream conversation. They are difficult to monetize at scale. You cannot build a trillion-dollar industry around someone converting their own wood scraps into cooking gas in their backyard. And so the investment, the media attention, the policy support, and the public awareness all flow toward the large-scale solutions, leaving the small-scale ones in the shadows. Now, here is what I think is the most important economic point in this entire conversation. Energy independence, even partial energy independence, changes your relationship with the economy in a fundamental way. When a meaningful portion of your energy needs are met by something you produce yourself or something your local community produces collectively, you become less exposed to the price volatility that comes with centralized, commodity-driven energy markets. You are not immune. You are not completely off the grid, but you have a buffer, and that buffer, over time, translates into real financial resilience. Think about what happens to a small farming operation or a rural household or a small food processing business when energy prices spike. Their costs go up immediately, their margins get squeezed, they have no leverage, no alternative, no negotiating power. Now, think about what happens to that same operation if even 30 or 40% of their energy needs are being met by a biomass gasifier running on wood waste they were already generating as a byproduct of their work. That spike still hurts, but it hurts less. They have room to breathe, they have time to adapt. That is not a small thing. In economic terms, that kind of resilience is extraordinarily valuable, and it is almost never discussed in the context of energy policy. The other dimension of this that deserves serious attention is the knowledge dimension. One of the most underappreciated forms of economic security is technical knowledge, knowing how to do something, Really knowing it, not just having read about it, gives you options that money alone cannot always buy. The person who understands the basics of biomass gasification, who has built or at least studied a small working system, who understands what inputs produce what outputs and why, that person has a form of capability that is genuinely valuable in a world where energy costs are unpredictable and centralized systems are increasingly fragile. This is not a survivalist argument. This is not about preparing for collapse. This is about the straightforward economic value of understanding your options. The more options you understand, the better decisions you can make. And right now, most people understand almost none of their energy options beyond paying whoever sends them a bill. Let me also address something directly, because I know some people watching this will have the same reaction I would have had a few years ago. This sounds interesting, but is it actually practical for me? Can a regular person, without specialized training or expensive equipment, actually build and use a small wood gasifier? The honest answer is, it depends. It depends on your circumstances, your technical comfort level, your local regulations, and what you are trying to accomplish. A basic small-scale wood gasifier capable of producing enough gas for cooking or running a small generator is within the capability of someone with moderate mechanical skills and access to basic metal fabrication tools. There are detailed engineering plans available through agricultural extension programs, international development organizations, and academic institutions that have been specifically designed for low-resource environments. This is not secret knowledge locked behind a paywall. It is out there, documented, and accessible. What requires more sophistication is scaling up, integrating these systems safely with existing appliances, and optimizing output quality for specific applications. That is where engineering expertise becomes genuinely important and where cutting corners can create real safety risks. Gas handling in any form requires respect for the hazards involved. That is true of natural gas, propane, and syngas alike. The technology is safe when built and operated correctly. It requires the same basic care and knowledge that any fuel handling system requires. But the point stands. This is not a fantasy. This is not a YouTube trick that sounds good and does nothing. This is real applied chemistry with a documented history, real economic implications, and real potential for people who are willing to go beyond the surface and actually learn how it works. And that, honestly, is what this channel is about. Not telling you what to think, not selling you a product or a course or a miracle solution, just pulling back the curtain on things that are real, that matter economically, and that, for various reasons, never make it into the conversation that most people are having about money, energy, and the future. If this video made you think differently about something you thought you already understood, that is the goal. If it opened up a question you had never thought to ask before, even better. Share this video with someone who you think needs to hear it, someone who is struggling with energy costs, someone who is curious about how things actually work, someone who is tired of feeling like they have no options. Because the more people understand these things, the harder it becomes to keep them in the dark. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it right now. Not because we ask every video, we do not, but because if this is the kind of content that actually respects your intelligence and your time, you deserve to see more of it without having to hunt for it. Hit that subscribe button, and we will keep doing exactly this. Finding the quiet, ignored, genuinely important corners of economics and energy, and bringing them into the light. This has been Boring Economic Update. The name is ironic. The content never is.